OG Ninjago. If I were to give a brief intro, it would be a bunch of ninja using elemental powers to save the world. Since then, we've learned that there are many other elemental masters with their own unique powers. We've even had 2 whole seasons of the show focused on learning about those powers. So in this video, I'm gonna rank them all, so stay tuned. But before we get started, there are a couple of elemental powers that I will not be including in the list, and they are the following: Amber, Brute Force, Fear, and Misfortune. Brute Force, Fear, and Misfortune are the powers of the Forbidden 5, or 3 of them, and I feel like I don't know enough about them to give an accurate ranking. We barely saw Brute Force, never saw Fear, and I'm not exactly sure how powerful Misfortune is still. As for Amber though, I have a different reason. I feel like the strength of Amber depends on the situation of the Elemental Master. For example, if you can come into contact with a bunch of Elemental Masters and absorb their powers, you're pretty strong, but if you've never met an Elemental Master in your life, then it's pretty weak. It has the potential to be really strong or weak, so I don't think I can rank it properly. Anyway, onto the actual list now. Starting off with number 33, here I put Balance. And don't get me wrong, I think that Balance is a pretty useful elemental power, but this is the strongest elemental powers, not the most useful, and I just don't think this is that strong in battle. I mean, it doesn't have that many practical applications unless you're battling on a really, unstable surface where you need balance. I just don't think it's quite as powerful as some of the other ones, though it's definitely useful. Number 32, we have Surface Tension, and this one I'm just not really sure what to think of. You can basically make a bunch of bubbles with this, and I don't know if that's super impactful in battle. I don't know, I feel like some of the ones that we'll be seeing, like Fire, Lightning, the original 4 elemental powers, are just so much stronger than this, and I don't think it would be super useful in battle either. Number 31, we have Sound, and I think Sound is a bit more useful in battle. This one's basically, from what I can understand, in season 4, it was used for echolocation and stuff. I'm pretty sure you can send out sonic waves, which is, it's pretty useful, I'm not gonna lie. We've seen them break glass with those waves, but at the same time, we did see Skylar using just Fire defeat Sound pretty easily, so I don't think it's all that strong. Going on to number 30, we have yet another useful but kind of weak elemental power. We have Fusion, and for Fusion, don't get me wrong, I know Geo's done so much stuff with Fusion. He's been able to protect them, make a wall when they were hiding from the Hoarder in Dragon's Rising Season 1, but in battle, if it's just one-on-one combat, I can't really imagine this would be all that useful. I mean, can you fuse living things to non-living things? If you can fuse the Elemental Master to the ground, that would be very useful, but I don't think you can do that with Fusion. The only other thing I can think of is that you can make weapons to fight your enemies, but I don't think it's all that powerful compared to some of the other ones we'll see. It's certainly very useful, but it's not really strong. Going on to number 29, we have Form, and I think this is yet another victim of super useful, but not really powerful. I mean, if this is a one-on-one battle against someone, they know you have Form, they're just gonna be really careful of everyone, and the fact that you can shapeshift doesn't really impact that. Unless you could shapeshift into a bigger person and become stronger. I'm not really sure if that's how Form works, but if this is in a situation where there's a lot of people, or you're a spy, then Form would be extremely useful. But I feel like those with the elemental power of Form aren't really frontline fighters, but more ninja who gain intelligence and stuff like that, so I just don't think it's a super strong elemental power per se. Next up, to number 28, we have the elemental power of Propulsion. If you don't know what this power is, neither did I until I searched it up today morning. Apparently, we briefly saw it in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2. It's basically where the Elemental Master creates a ball around himself and shoots himself at the opponent, which I guess is somewhat powerful, but at the same time, we didn't see it all too much in Dragon's Rising Season 2, so I'm guessing it's not super powerful because the Elemental Master was able to be defeated super easily, and at the same time, it's a very specific elemental power. It's not really versatile, if you know what I mean, and if you just jump out of the way of the rolling ball, I don't think it's all that powerful, which is why it's somewhat low on the list. Moving on to number 27, we have Metal, and Metal was a pretty cool elemental power, but not gonna lie, looking back on it, all that it pretty much does is that it just creates armor around you, and not much more. It does make you somewhat stronger because it packs your like punches with more power, but at the same time, I feel like this would have pretty big weaknesses. For example, lightning. Lightning would be devastating to metal, like one zap and you're already electrocuted. And it's just not all that like new, powerful. I don't think it's super easy to attack someone while they're in their metal shield, but at the same time, you have more stronger elemental powers coming up, which I think could defeat metal pretty easily. Going on to one of those powers, at number 26 we have Poison, and I think Poison is a fairly powerful elemental power. It basically allows you to shoot poison or create poisonous clouds, but I think the main reason why this is above metal is because I think if you just have poison, creating poisonous clouds is such a useful thing in battle. If anyone breathes your poison, they're automatically taken out or they're like dead and stuff. Though we have seen the weaknesses of this power. We saw how Noct like pretty much trashed Talks in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2. So I don't think it's super powerful, but I think it does have its uses in battle, and I think it could be deadly to some of the other elemental powers that we've seen below. Moving on to number 25, we have Plants, and Plants basically just lets you make plants. I'm not really sure what else there is. It's all in the name, so yeah, decent elemental power. If you're in the jungle, it's pretty useful, but I don't think it's all that powerful. In a similar vein, at number 24, we have nature, and honestly, I'm not really sure what the difference is between like nature and plants. If any of you know, let me know down in the comments below, but from what I can understand, nature and plants pretty much do the same thing. Though I think nature is just a bit stronger because we got to see more of it in Season 4. We saw how Balobo was able to like not just create plants, but like control living plants. He was able to like grow them, use them to like ensnare his enemies with his vines and stuff. I think that's pretty useful in battle. I think that's certainly a very powerful elemental power, but it's not all that powerful compared to some of the other stuff that we're gonna see later on. On to number 23, now we have Figment, and Figment basically just lets you clone yourself. I think that's a pretty powerful elemental power because like always, I mean, the more the merrier. What else is there to say? I don't think there's much more to this elemental power, but the ability to clone yourself is inherently very powerful, so that's why this thing is somewhat high. Moving on to number 22, we have Quake, and I think Quake is just kind of like a sub-power of Earth. And I mean, spoiler I guess, but Earth is far, far above Quake on this list, and I think that's because Earth has a bunch of other benefits, like you can levitate rocks, it gives you super strength and that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Quake, it just kind of lets you shake whatever you're on, and it's useful. I think it's definitely powerful. I think that Quake definitely isn't the most powerful, though we've seen how it can be used in battle, and I don't think it's weak at all, so I think number 22 is a good spot for it. Number 21, we have Shadow, and I think Shadow's a pretty strong elemental power. You can kind of like vanish into shadows, you can like turn into a shadow. I think that something else we'll see later on is Light, and this is basically like similar to Light, but Light lets you disappear into light and Shadow lets you disappear into shadows. I think that number 21 is a pretty good spot for this because I think some of the other ones that we're going to see later on are a bit more powerful than this. I know I'm saying that a lot, but just some of these elemental powers we've gone through, the only reason they're kind of low is because I haven't really seen too much of them, and they could be really powerful if we saw more of them, but I just don't think they're all that powerful based on what we've seen so far. I just don't think these are quite up to the mark. Same thing can be said for number 20, Shockwave. This basically just lets you shoot shockwaves. I mean, cool power, I guess. It's pretty powerful in battle. We saw how Zeatrix was able to use it pretty successfully against a bunch of her opponents, but it does have its definite weaknesses. I think stuff like fire and energy basically do what it does, but a bit better. It's an okay elemental power. I'll just leave it at that. I don't think it's amazing, but it's not bad. Moving on to number 19, we have Light, and I think this one's slightly better than Shadow because it makes you invisible, and I think that's like the best use of this. We have seen Mr. Pale using Light in other ways in the Tournament of the Sources, but I think just the ability to turn yourself invisible is very useful in battle, though Light doesn't give you many other advantages. It doesn't make you physically stronger, so it's not the strongest, but I think it's a really good one to use in battle. At number 18, we have Size, and Size is another one that we just recently saw. This one basically lets you guessed it, increase or decrease your size, so you're basically Ant-Man. I think that's a pretty useful elemental power. Like, if your opponent is overpowering you, just increase your size. I think that's pretty useful, but then again, there are some stuff that we're gonna see later on that I feel is just a bit more powerful. From what I can see about the elemental power of size, it's pretty strong, it has a lot of uses, but it's not as strong as some of the other ones we'll see. At number 17, we have Decay, and Decay is an interesting power because it is genuinely horrific. We saw how Kerr was so easily able to like zombify anyone she came up against by just touching them, and boom, they were already like dying. But at the same time, we never really saw Kerr using Decay like over a long distance, so I'm just thinking, if you're in a one-on-one battle against the elemental power of Decay, if you just stay away from the elemental master, I think you should be fine. Like, I'm not really sure. I'm trying to think back to all the scenes where Kerr used her elemental power, and Kerr is a pretty strong elemental master, but I just don't think Decay is super useful over long distances. Now, that being said, if you're a smart elemental master, you could like close the distance so that you can use Decay more effectively, which is why I think this elemental power is near the middle of the list and not near like the low end, because I think it does have its uses, but at the same time, there are ways to get around it. Moving on to number 16, we have Wildfire's elemental power, Heat. In my personal own like headcanon, of course, I have no confirmation of this, but in my personal headcanon, I think that Heat is just kind of like a more subdued version of fire. We saw in that scene where Kai and Wildfire shoot down those cans, Kai's fire was able to just like destroy those cans, but Heat just kind of like melted them. So I think that Heat is definitely strong, but it's not as strong as fire per se. Heat, I think, is similar to Quake, where it's like, it's a worse version of one of the 4 original elemental powers. I don't think it's quite as strong as fire, but I don't think it's weak at all. And the ability to like heat up stuff, that has uses in battle. She can shoot fireballs, so I think this power is definitely strong, but not like a top 10 elemental power, which is why it's again near the middle of the list. Moving on to number 15, we have technology, and we have seen that technology can be insanely powerful. I mean, most of the gadgets that the ninja have are made by Sora using her technology power. That being said, this power is somewhat situation based. Like, for example, in Dragon's Rising Season 1 and in some parts of Season 2, because she was surrounded by Imperium and technology, she was able to use her elemental powers to like defeat the Photax or create new mechs. But in Dragon's Rising Season 3, at least when they're searching for the prismatic blades, they're far away from technology, so Sora's power is basically useless. That being said, the ability to control and create technology, especially in the Ninjago world, which is so high tech, is very useful. We've seen her mechs and her gadgets and her like vehicles being used many times. So I think that it's very useful in battle if there's technology, but even if there isn't technology, the ability to create stuff from technology that can be useful, I think easily elevates this power in my eyes. But just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Anyway, back to the video. Moving on to number 14, we have Reflex, and this one we saw pretty briefly, but it did defeat Zane, who is one of the original ninjas, so it definitely can't be weak. It basically, from what I can understand, gives you really fast reflexes, which makes it really hard for opponents to like land a blow on you, which is a huge plus in battle. Besides, I think this can make you like punch people faster and attack faster because you have way faster reflexes. You can dodge their attacks and like punch back, so I think this is a pretty decent spot for it. Moving on to number 13, now we have Speed, and Speed is pretty similar to Reflex, where, I mean, if you're fast, you obviously have very quick reflexes, and Speed we have seen quite a bit of. We've seen Griffin Turner use it successfully against other elemental powers in Season 4. Speed, I think, is just such a useful elemental power because, again, it's going to be really hard for opponents to land a blow on you if you're moving around really quickly. You could also, like, barrage your opponents with a bunch of punches, and I think that this has a lot of uses in battle. You could easily run away from opponents. That being said, Speed doesn't like enhance your personal strength or anything like that, though I think Speed is certainly very useful and very strong, which is why it's near the top 10, but some of the other elemental powers, again, that we're gonna see, I feel like are a bit stronger. Moving on to number 12, we have Gravity, and I know what you're gonna say in the comments, oh, but we saw Griffin Turner defeating Gravis in the Tournament of the Elements, and yes, I agree, but that is because of 2 reasons. Number 1, the format of the tournament, where you have to collect a Jade Blade rather than like actually defeat the opponent, And number 2, because I think Gravis is an idiot. Gravity is such a useful and powerful elemental power. I mean, it's basically just the force. You can make stuff float in the air, you can make yourself levitate, you can make your opponent levitate, and most importantly, like, your opponent has no control over any of this. I think this power is extremely OP. I would have loved to see more of it because I think there are more ways you can use gravity, but from what we saw, I'm pretty impressed by gravity. I think it is one of the coolest elemental powers, and I think it's definitely stronger than all of the other ones that we've seen so far. Moving on to number 11, now we have wind, and this was an elemental power originating from Wojira, which I think is a huge plus because Wojira was extremely powerful. At the same time, I think wind has a lot of useful powers. You can use it to make yourself float, like we've seen with Euphrasia and also Moro. We've also seen Euphrasia and Moro shooting gusts of wind at their opponents, which is a very useful thing in battle. Overall, because the world of Ninjago is surrounded by, well, air, it makes wind very powerful because wind kind of gives you the ability to control air. I mean, you can fly, you can shoot air at your opponents. I think this is a very strong elemental power for sure. Now going on to the top 10, in my opinion, the other power that comes from Wojira, we have water. And I think water is very similar to wind in the sense that it's very powerful because the Ninjago world is surrounded by water. There's water everywhere. Even in the Never realm where there's only ice, not water, Nia was able to use her connection to water to manipulate the ice. Also, I think that water is just such a destructive force. We've seen stuff like tsunamis and hurricanes and how they're easily able to like destroy towns and homes. And we've also seen this in Ninjago in Seabound when Wojira basically takes over Ninjago City. Also, another bonus for water, humans can't breathe in water, so like if you drown humans, they will die. Overall, I think there's a lot of uses for water. We've seen Nia convincingly able to blast her opponents with her water blast, also able to control the sea. That's how she defeated the Preeminent. So I think that water is a pretty strong elemental power, definitely a top 10. Moving on to number 9 though, we have smoke, and I think smoke is powerful for a bunch of reasons. Firstly, if you shoot smoke at someone, it makes it hard to breathe. That's a big plus. Secondly, you can kind of like travel around using smoke. You can disappear into smoke, which means it makes it very hard for someone to actually hit you because you can just disappear into a cloud of smoke. When you disappear into a cloud of smoke, you can kind of like travel around. So that's basically teleporting. And teleporting is extremely powerful in battle. I don't need to tell you that. So I think smoke has a lot of useful abilities. And we've seen Cinder using smoke. That being said, he did also use Shatter Spin, but he did use a lot of smoke, and he was able to absolutely, like, mop the floor with all of the ninja. So, I think that smoke is a very useful and powerful elemental power, so I think number 9 is a good spot for it. At number 8 now, we have Swarm, and Swarm is basically just smoke, but instead of controlling smoke, you control bugs. It has a lot of the same stuff. Like, you can disappear into a cloud of bugs, you can use bugs to, like, teleport you around, and at the same time, you can shoot bugs at your opponents. But I think Swarm is a little bit powerful because bugs just have more substance than smoke. So, I mean, if you overwhelm someone with a bunch of bugs. At the same time, we've seen Swarm's ability to take damage when Kai shoots a fireball at Drix. Drix just doesn't do anything. The bugs just reform his body. That's so gross. But at the same time, it's really, really powerful in battle. Also, it seems like the bugs can, like, give messages, which is a huge plus. Like, I think that Swarm is really similar to Smoke, but just a bit more powerful. Going on to number 7, now we have Mind, and fighting the Elemental Master of Mind would really give me a headache. You guys see what I did there? Anyway, Mind has a lot of useful powers. You can use it to read your opponent's mind, which is crazy. I think that's a really useful power in battle. That being said, it seems like it does take time to read your opponent's mind. You have to like put your hands to your head and just concentrate for a second to read their mind. But I mean, if you're more powerful and you can just instantaneously read the mind of your opponent, that gives you a huge advantage in battle. That's basically like knowing your opponent's next moves. You can also use it to like give your opponents headaches and stuff, which is again very useful in battle because headaches are it's really hard to fight with a headache, like period. We've heard Garmadon in season 4 saying never underestimate the power of the mind, and yeah, I'm inclined to agree. This is a very strong elemental power. Now moving on to the top 6, here we get into the original 4 elements, and I think that these are some of the most powerful elemental powers because, well, we've seen them used time and time again successfully, and also they were the elemental powers of the first Spinjitzu Master, so I mean, they can't be too weak. Starting off here at number 6 though, I have Ice, and I do believe this is the weakest of the original 4, not because I think it's inherently weak, but because I think that it lacks the sheer like destructive nature of something like fire or lightning. But at the same time, I don't think it's weak at all. I think ice has a lot of uses. For example, we've seen Zane build like ice walls. You can use ice to trap your opponents. You can also use ice to make roller coasters, I guess, like Zane does in Season 1 to escape the Great Devourer. The ability to freeze stuff, I think inherently is just extremely powerful, which is why I think ice is so high up. It has many uses and it's extremely strong. Going on to the top 5 now, we have fire, and we've seen this element used time and time again very successfully. It's been proven in countless different seasons, and I think that fire in and of itself, without being an elemental power, is just incredibly dangerous. I mean, lots of things burn very easily, and when you have the elemental power of fire, it's going to be one of the strongest ones out there. Basically, all we've seen from this is Kai being able to shoot fire, which is incredibly simple, but at the same time, I mean, it's effective, it works, it defeats enemies, it's very hard to counter, so I think that fire is still incredibly powerful and one of the best elemental powers out there. So yeah, not much more to say on fire, an incredibly simple element, but then again, good luck trying to counter it. Going on to number 4 now, we have lightning, and lightning in my opinion is just kind of like a better version of fire. It has a lot of the destructive elements that fire has, and we've seen Jay use it kind of like fire, shooting lightning bolts to just destroy everything in his path. But also lightning has another aspect to it where you can use it to kind of like electrocute stuff, which I think is incredibly helpful because there is a lot of technology in the Ninjago world, and we've seen Jay using his lightning to rewire stuff or to shock the vermilion snakes while they were drowning in water. So I think there's multiple uses to lightning, which makes it a bit better than fire, but not by much, and I think both lightning and fire are incredibly close, though I slightly prefer lightning a bit more. Going on to the top 3 now, we have the final of the original 4 elements. We have earth, and earth in my opinion is the strongest because of its versatility, its simplicity, and yet its power. There's a lot of stuff you can do with earth because the whole world of Ninjago is, well, on top of earth. So we've seen Cole use it to like track footsteps and stuff. He can feel rumblings through the earth like he felt in Dragon's Rising. At the same time, he can use earth to like create mountains. Of course, he has that ability where he can shake it, which is similar to Quake, but there's more to it. He can create mountains, he can make rocks float in the air. We've seen him use his earth ability to make like that stone golem, which is an incredibly impressive feat. I love it. On top of that, earth gives you super strength, which is crazy, so I think this is a pretty solid element all around. It's very hard to attack the Master of Earth because, again, I can just put up a big earth wall, but at the same time, if the Master of Earth wanted to attack someone, it would be very easy, just throw a bunch of rocks at him. So I think earth is incredibly powerful in that regard, and that's why it's my favorite, and that's why it's in the top 3. Going on to the top 2 now, we have the elemental power of green. I mean energy, I mean life. I don't really know what to call it. Seems like Dragon's Rising has been calling it the power of life. It's Lloyd's power. I'm guessing it comes from the source dragon of life, which is why we're calling it life now, but I think this one's incredibly powerful. It's similar to fire in the sense that it's just kind of simple and inherently very destructive. Lloyd basically just uses it to shoot green orbs, which it's proven to be effective time and time again, and it's why Lloyd is the strongest ninja, is because of his elemental power. Lloyd's elemental power is also supposed to be like the combination of the original 4, which we haven't seen too much of post Season 2 or Season 3, but I think it still does have those elements. You have like the destructive elements of fire and lightning and the defensive elements of earth and ice, so I think it's an all-in-one power, and again, it is incredibly powerful. It comes from the first Bijutsu Master and the Source Dragon of Life, and I guess all elemental powers do, but I have a theory that maybe Lloyd's elemental power has a closer connection to the Source Dragons because it is shown to be more powerful than the other ones on multiple occasions, and just because it is more powerful, I'm gonna have to put it higher. I think number 2 is a fairly good spot for it. But now on to number 1, the strongest elemental power we've seen in Ninjago. In my opinion, has to be time. Now, I don't know who came up with this idea, but the elemental power of time is just insanely overpowered. Firstly, it's 4 elemental powers in one. You can like speed up time, slow down time, pause time, and reverse time. speeding up and slowing down time is incredibly helpful. Speeding up time is basically like giving you the elemental power of speed. The ability to pause time is very helpful, but I think it's the ability to reverse time that really makes this OP, because if you ever lose, you can just reverse time. You know what your opponent's gonna do. Like, it's basically impossible to defeat someone who has the ability to literally reverse time. Like, I'm pretty sure the only way to defeat an elemental master of time is to kill him or her before they even get the chance to use the power, because if they use the power, it's incredibly OP and you can't do anything. Of course, you could also like fight in a Vengestone cave, which would make the power useless, but that's kind of my point. The only way to fight an elemental master of time is to make sure they can't use the elemental power, because the elemental power is too OP. So yeah, I think that just shows how insanely OP this power is, and definitely the strongest elemental power in Ninjago. But keep in mind, those are just my thoughts, and a lot of this is based on my own personal headcanon, because we haven't really seen a lot of these elemental powers, and we haven't seen them specifically up against each other, or even their full capacity except for like the top 4. So I'm not entirely sure if this list is completely accurate, but it's the best one I got. So if you have any changes, let me know down in the comments below, and if you want to see me rank some other stuff, make sure to check this video on the screen right now, and I'll see you in the next one.